Alright everybody, welcome back. My name is Shatso and I hope everyone is staying safe and doing well. Now, what you're seeing here is not an error. What you're hearing is not just, well, it is just game audio, but I decided to do something a little bit different just because of my current situation. Now, based on my previous videos, you may have seen that my PC isn't really cut out to record videos, or rather, encode videos properly. And yeah, so my PC is so old that it just doesn't have the hardware to encode videos. And considering how much I know about computers, I might have to like do some serious research to figure out exactly what I can do, what things I can replace, etc. So I thought that as an everyday consumer of other YouTube channels, I often enjoy multitasking. I'll just put on like a 2-3 hour stream from another YouTube channel, and I'll just sort of listen to that in the background. And considering I can't always look at the screen based on what I'm doing, I decided to cater to sort of what I enjoy, which is essentially having just audio in the background while I do anything else. So, as you can hear in the background, I am playing Duel Links. Now, this is sort of one of 3 accounts that I used to have. I used to have my main account, which I had that since maybe 2013, and I had quite a bit of events done and so many decks in that account. And due to like a weird data transfer mechanic from Konami, I did have Konami ID for that account as well as two others. This is one of the 3 accounts that had the Konami ID. Point is, if you choose to data transfer from the title screen, you will successfully sort of log in to one of your accounts. But if you sort of choose to um, go to the game beyond the title screen and you go to settings from inside the game, if you go to data transfer settings, I'm sure it does have a disclaimer here saying that if you set up data transfer with the new Konami ID, you will no longer be able to transfer your data using your previous Konami ID. And essentially what that means is you sort of lose the data from a previous account and link both accounts to your new account. So if you start a new account or just download the game and you want to sort of link your current account to an old account, it'll erase the data from your old account and make it the data from your new account. So by doing that, I lost maybe, we're looking at maybe 6 very mediocre decks. They were all fun jank decks. I had a functional alien deck that was a solid 6,000 gems, which by the way, gems in this game are just so hard to come by. Grinding eventually just becomes you something in the background. if you play on mobile, it does take up a lot of time. But now that I'm on PC, I can sort of multitask and just auto duel and grind in the background. So I also had a Ubel deck of Fire King and Ubel deck, and that did take. I dug pretty deep into that one box. That also took about 5,000 gems to get every single creature from the core, just necessary to make the deck work. I also had a lot of character decks unlocked, such as Dark Necrofear. I had a functioning Fiend deck. I also unlocked, I believe the card is called Pumpkin King. Yeah, Bones' Pumpkin King. I made a functional deck around that too, and it was pretty fun. I also had plenty of the structure decks. In one of my accounts, I had a Blue Eyes like meta deck, and for that, I actually didn't pay too many gems. It was mostly just a structure deck and some more Blue Eyes, some more Blue Eyes stuff. Now, among those many decks that took so many gems to build, the one I was most proud of was definitely a Madolche deck. Now, that Madolche deck had quite a few improvements. I worked on making it sort of all Madolche cards because I had seen other builds of the deck with tuners to synchro summon using the Madolches, considering Madolches go back into your deck if they are sent to your graveyard. So I'm just gonna read off the effect that's on each Madolche card. It says, when this card in your possession is destroyed by your opponent's card, either by battle or by card effect, and sent to your graveyard, shuffle this card into the deck. When this card is special summoned, you can add one Madolche. Well, that's a separate effect, but essentially, when it's sent to the graveyard, you shuffle it back into the deck. And sort of many effects in the deck work based off not having creatures in your graveyard. So it's sort of important to keep the theme of the deck and make sure you don't have creatures in the graveyard at all. Now, in this new account, I started from scratch, and unfortunately, a lot of the core Madolche cards are in a main box, and the box is called Burning Nova. There's, I believe, 180 packs in the box, and I'm down to like 70 packs. So I would say, yeah, that's definitely more than half the box to get most of the Madolche cards. And then there's also some more Madolche cards in a separate box, which is... Now I'm running a build of the deck that does not include Madolche Babel or Madolche Marmalade. Now these two were in a build where we're in a build of a previous iteration of the deck where at the time being the meta was the newly renowned Blue Eyes and Red Eyes structure decks. So around that time, all you would see when you played ranked was Blue Eyes decks and Red Eyes decks. And considering there was structured decks for both, um, you would see sort of the same strategy over and over again. And so a turn 1 Red Eyes Fusion was very common, or a turn, I don't know, turn 2 um, 3 Blue Eyes on the board was also very common. So Madolche Babel says, once per turn, you can target one attack position Madolche monster you control and one face-up attack position monster your opponent controls. If both monsters are still in the field, change them to face-up defense position. And if you do, the ones changed by this effect cannot have their battle positions changed until the end of your opponent's next turn. So essentially what that means is, if your opponent summons a turn 1 Red Eyes Fusion, you just drop a Madolche Babel in attack position. You use this effect to tap Madolche Babel and the Red Eyes Fusion, and that'll buy you an extra turn to sort of get set up. Now, sort of the core of the deck is going to be a few cards. I'm just gonna go over each of the cards in sort of the basic form of the deck. The ones with Marmalade and Madolche Babel are sort of more for a control strategy against big or sort of decks with big creatures and not too many monster effects. So first, sort of the ace of the deck, Madolche Pudding says, and this says, while you have no monsters in your graveyard, this card gains 800 attack and defense. After damage calculation, when this card battles an opponent's monster, you can target one card your opponent controls, destroy that target. Now, Madolche Pudding says has 1000 attack and 1000 defense to begin with. So, if you summon her and there's no creatures on the board, she's going to be a base 1800. Now, her most important effect says, essentially, if you attack with her or she is attacked, you get to destroy a card on the field. And that's very important to sort of get rid of big beefy monsters. If they have a 3000 attack Blue Eyes and also a smaller creature, you can go ahead and attack the smaller creature and then use Madolche Pudding's effect to destroy the Blue Eyes. And that way you can also clear boards very often and slow down your opponents by a lot. The next card is Madolche Messengelado, and this says, when this card is special summoned, you can add one Madolche spell or trap card from your deck to your hand. You must control face-up beast-type Madolche monster to activate and to resolve this effect. Now you're going to be special summoning this with a little sort of Madolche cat, and essentially the Madolche cat says, when you summon it, when you normal summon it, you get to special summon a Madolche card from your hand, and usually that'll be one of any Madolche monsters. There are only 4 monsters in the deck, at least in the base form. There is Madolche Pudding says, Messengelado, the cat, and the dog, which is easily my favorite artwork I think I've ever seen, just because it's just a cute puppy sitting on top of just a piece of croissant, I guess. Point being, croissant is obviously a very nice pun. Now, as I said, the cat special summons and Madolche croissant says once per turn, you can target one face of Madolche card you control except this card. Return it to the hand. And if you do, increase this card's level by 1 and attack by 300. Now this is mostly used for when you use the cat to special summon Princes on the field. And the idea is, if you give your opponent a target other than Princes, they will take that target. And considering sort of Croissant is at base 1500, Madolche Princes is at a base 1800, Madolche Mesengelato is a base 1600 attack, and the Madolche Cat is only a 500-300. So it is the weakest card on the board, and even though your opponent might not want to attack Princes or your cute dog boy here, the cat is very vulnerable on the board. So you want to have ways to bounce back cards to your hand, and that also adds to the Croissant's attack. Now let's go over some of the important spell cards. Most of these are Madolche spell cards. So Madolche Chateau, which is what I based the name of this channel after. Okay, so it says, when this card is activated, shuffle all Madolche monsters in your graveyard into the deck. All Madolche monsters on the field gain 500 attack and defense. If a monster in your graveyard would be returned to the deck by the effect of a Madolche monster, you can add it to your hand instead. So what that means is, if a creature gets into your graveyard and is about to return back to the deck, you have the choice of putting it back in your hand. And that's very good for maybe if you get a bad hand and you get a turn 1 cat, but no target for the cat, and you only have the field spell. You have the option of returning the cat to your hand in case you draw another monster, and that way you get to use the cat to special summon that monster. Now the main idea is to special summon Mesengelato to get field spells. Well, not field spells, but any Madolche spell or trap. Another important engine for the deck is Madolche Ticket. There's a really cool combo with this and Madolche Princes that we'll go over right now. And Madolche Ticket says, when a Madolche card is returned from your side of the field or graveyard to your hand or main deck by a card effect, add a 1 Madolche monster from your deck to your hand. If you control a face-up fairy type Madolche monster, you can special summon the monster from your deck in face-up attack position instead of adding it to your hand. You can only use the effect of Madolche Ticket once per turn. So what this means is, if you have a Madolche Ticket on the board, you normal summon Madolche Cat to special summon Madolche Princes. Now I am using Taya here, or as I like to call her, Tea Garden. And I'm using her ability Holy Guard. And Holy Guard says you can't take damage during your turn. Well, you can't take battle damage. So if your little 500 attack cat crashes into a 3000 attack Blue Eyes, you won't take damage from that clash. And that's very important because if you have Madolche Ticket on the board, you can normal summon the cat to special summon Princes. And now you crash the cat into a big creature, and the cat goes into the graveyard and back into the deck, which activates Madolche Ticket. Now, Madolche Pudding says is actually a fairy type. Uh, so what that means is Madolche Ticket's second effect lets you either draw a Madolche monster or special summon a Madolche monster. Now, obviously, you want to special summon another Pudding says. So now you have two 1800 destroyers on the board, or if you have the field spell, you have two 2300 destroyers on the board. Now, if you're patient and you wait, considering Madolche Ticket is only once per turn, if you wait and don't attack, you can actually have a combo where if your opponent destroys one of your Madolche Pudding says, instead of drawing it, you can send it back into the deck, and then Madolche Ticket will bring her right back out, which will essentially give you plenty of ways to clear your opponent's board. Just by brute force. And if you do get the combo, it's always very satisfying. It seems unfair, but it's a rogue strategy at the end of the day. It's very fun to play. Now, another sort of there's the deck is pretty balanced. There's only 21 cards in the base form of this deck. We'll go into the trap cards right now. So the first trap card is Madolche Lesson. And this says, target one Madolche monster in your graveyard, shuffle that target into the deck, and if you do, all Madolche monsters you currently control gain 800 attack and defense. Then you can shuffle one other monster from your graveyard to your deck. Now you might be thinking, what is this doing in a deck that's meant to not have any creatures in the graveyard? Well, if you tribute a monster to summon Madolche Pudding says, because Madolche Pudding says is a 5-star creature, which means it takes one tribute to normal summon her. So if you tribute summon Madolche Pudding says, the creature you triggered doesn't go back into the deck. It actually stays in the graveyard. And when you first start off playing the deck, you learn that the hard way. So if somehow you get a really bad hand, you only have one creature on the board, for desperate measures, you can tribute summon Madolche Pudding says, and sort of wait for Madolche Lesson to go off, which will sort of buff Madolche Pudding says that's already on the board, and it will also make sure you have no creatures in your graveyard. So we move on to some of the control aspect of the deck. We have Madolche Knights, and this says, when a monster effect is activated, if you have no monsters in your graveyard, negate the activation. Then if you control Madolche Pudding says, shuffle one random card from your opponent's hand into the deck. Now, this is very helpful for going up against almost any deck. Some people don't even use spells to control the board. Some people just use sort of their creature's effects, or they are running a combo deck and they rely on one creature's effect to sort of start their engine, and you can actually slow that down. The only prerequisite is that you have no monsters in your graveyard. Now the secondary effect is, in case you do have Pudding Says on the board, you get the extra perk that says shuffle one random card from your opponent's hand into the deck. So you net them one less card advantage on the board, and both on the board and in their hand, which is pretty crazy. Which, speaking of crazy, we have Madolche Tea Break. Madolche Tea Break says, when a spell or trap card is activated, if you have no monsters in your graveyard, negate the activation. And if you do, return it to the hand. Then, if you control face of Madolche Pudding says, you can destroy one card your opponent controls. Now again, this says The only prerequisite to activate this, the first effect, which is to you essentially counter a spell or a trap card. If you counter a spell, there's really no point because they can just replay it the same turn. But if you counter a trap, um, it gets sent back to their hand and they can't use it until next turn. So it saves you a little bit of time. Now, the perk of Madolche Pudding says you can destroy one card your opponent controls, which is insane considering Madolche Pudding is already a destroyer, and with this trap, you get to destroy one more thing on the board, and also return one card to their hand, which is pretty insane. So both Madolche Knights and Madolche T-Break are used to sort of control back row or control combo decks. You know, sometimes depending on how you draw, this isn't great, but it is what it is. Now we move on to sort of a flavor card, Madolche Waltz. This says each time a Madolche monster you control attacks or is attacked, after damage calculation, inflict 300 damage to your opponent. So this is burn damage every time one of your Madolche creatures attacks or is attacked. They take 300 damage, and this adds up pretty quickly. And even though it's not a main win condition, it's definitely won me a few games by clutch. Okay, so now let's sort of go over what opening hand should be. The ratio from monsters to spells and traps is not great. You only have 8 creatures to about 13 spells and traps. So the odds of drawing a creature, a spell, and a trap sort of are imbalanced. There's a high chance you'll draw all spells and traps. But, you know, it is a double-edged sword. If you draw your field spell, as well as Madolche Ticket, you essentially just need one creature to get set up. So for example, if your opening hand is a field spell, Madolche Ticket, and like 2 random trap cards, you really just need to draw one creature, survive one turn, draw one creature, put it down, and just sort of wait to... With Madolche Ticket, every time you return a Madolche card from your graveyard to your hand or to the deck, you draw a Madolche creature of your choice. Which is important because, you know, regardless of what creature you get, as long as you have Ticket or Chateau, well, mostly Ticket, you get to draw whatever creature you need. So if you have the cat in your hand, and you just need a Pudding Cess, you just draw Pudding Cess from Madolche Ticket. Now, obviously, the only sort of sideboard thing in the deck is one Power of the Guardians. Now, Power of the Guardians comes from a box labeled, I think, Wizards. Something Wizards. Dimension of the Wizards. And in this box, there's also a few other Madolche cards, such as Madolche Marmalade, which says, when this card is flipped face up, you can target one Madolche spell trap card in your graveyard, add that target to your hand. And flip effects usually aren't that great, except she has 2000 defense. And if you have a field spell on the board, that's 2500 defense. And oftentimes, this would go in the old build of the deck, and many times they would either send the field spell to the graveyard or something, and you could immediately get it back and buy some time to get set up. Now, something else in the deck is also Madolche Mageline, and this was a one-off in the previous build, and it just says when this card is normal or flip summon, you can add one Madolche monster from your deck to your hand. And it was very situational back then. I didn't really um, deem it too important, considering you already had Madolche Ticket to do that for you, so you wouldn't depend on creatures too much. Her stats are okay. She has 1400 attack and 1700 defense. But just I liked having her as a one-off in the old deck, just in case. So yeah, something else in Dimension of the Wizards is Power of the Guardians. Now this is an insane card. First of all, it's just crazy. And it says if an attack is declared involving the equipped monster, place one spell counter on this card. The equipped monster gains 500 attack and defense for each spell counter on this card. If the equipped monster would be destroyed by battle or a card effect, you can remove one spell counter from your field instead. Now what that means is when your opponent declares an attack on the equipped monster immediately gains 500 attack and defense, and if they were to die, you can instead remove a counter from Power of the Guardians, which you can essentially do two things with this one card. You can make your one creature stronger, and you can also give it protection from kill spells or just from big creatures by removing counters from Power of the Guardians instead of destroying your creature. This is pretty difficult to get around. Your opponent would need to destroy it directly. The old build had two of these, I believe, and also a Wall of Disruption, which Wall of Disruption is definitely optional for a more control-oriented deck. And Wall of Disruption just says when is a trap card that says when your opponent declares an attack, remove 800 attack from each of your opponent's creatures, based on how many creatures they have on the board. So essentially, if they have two creatures on the board, each attack position creature they have loses 1600 attack. If they only have one creature on the board, that one creature loses 800 attack. If they have three creatures on the board, whatever is in attack position on your opponent's side of the field will lose 2400 attack permanently, which immediately deals damage to them and also leaves them with 0 attack creatures just open to take damage next turn. It sometimes just wins the game straight up. And the deck overall, depending on how you want to build it, can be a little more expensive. I dropped maybe 4,000 to, well, you can do the math. Yeah, I would say around 4 to 5,000 on a Madolche deck from scratch. And considering I already know how it works, I can definitely make do with a budget version of the deck just because I know how to control the board and just sort of when to surrender because you drew a bad hand. So the deck definitely does have bricky hands, but when you do draw at least a creature and the right cards, the right spell cards, you should be fine. Once you go off, it's very difficult to stop you, and if you prevent your opponents from doing their thing before they kill you, it'll just buy you time to help you set up, which is very important for the deck. Um, and that'll be it, I guess. If you made it this far, I want to thank you. Let me know what you think about sort of this new thing. Um, the background music is very faint in the uh, just down low in the back, just to give some context of the game. If you liked the video, let me know in the comments below. Leave a like, subscribe, and yeah, Chateau signing off.